Picture the sun-drenched plains of southern Italy. We are in the Campania region, just a short drive, about 30 kilometers, north of the chaos and color of Naples. Here, rising out of the earth like a mountain made of limestone and marble, is a structure so massive, so impossibly grand, that it doesn't quite feel real. This is the Royal Palace of Caserta, or, as the Italians call it, La Reggia di Caserta. To call it a residence feels like a massive understatement. It's like calling the Titanic a boat. Caserta isn't just a place where a king slept. It is a sprawling, shouting declaration of power. It is the physical manifestation of the 18th century Bourbon Dynasty, looking at the rest of Europe and saying, "We are greater." For centuries, this architectural titan, covering a staggering 47,000 square meters and hiding over 1,200 rooms inside its belly, has stood silently watching history unfold. It has seen the extravagant parties of the Kingdom of Naples. It has endured the boots of soldiers during the bloody battles of World War II. It fell into a deep, ghostly sleep and finally woke up to become a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This is the story of a dream that was too big to fail, even when history tried to leave it behind. From the mind of a jealous king to the silver screens of Hollywood, this is the journey of the Palace of Caserta. Part 1. The Vision. To really understand Caserta, you have to get inside the head of King Charles III of Bourbon. The year is around 1750. The Kingdom of Naples is flourishing, money is flowing, and culture is booming. But Charles has a chip on his shoulder. He looks at Versailles in France, he looks at the Royal Palace in Madrid, but mostly, he looks at Rome. He is jealous of the Pope's authority and the grandeur of the Vatican. Charles didn't just want a summer home, he wanted a new capital. He wanted to build a new Rome that would make the old one look like a provincial town. He needed a place that was safe from pirate attacks and naval bombardment, which Naples, sitting right on the coast, definitely was not. So he looked inland. He found the plains of Caserta, protected by the Tiffinini Mountains. It was a blank canvas, and on this canvas he decided to paint his masterpiece. But a king needs a visionary. Enter Luigi Vanvitelli. Vanvitelli wasn't just an architect, he was a master of scenography. He understood that buildings are like theater stages. They need to direct the eye and control the emotions. In 1751, Charles gave him the commission of a lifetime: create a city within a palace. On January 20th, 1752, on the king's birthday, they laid the foundation stone. It was a massive spectacle. Regiments of soldiers paraded, cannons fired, and mass was held. It was a message to the world. The Bourbons are here to stay. Vanvitelli's design was genius. He stood right on the edge of the Baroque era, just as it was shifting into the cleaner lines of neoclassicism. He imagined a massive rectangle, nearly 250 meters wide. Inside, he divided it with a cross shape to create 4 perfect courtyards. This wasn't just for looks. It brought light into the deepest parts of the monster building. But his real magic trick was something called the telescope effect. If you stand at the central entrance of the palace today and look straight through the building, your eye shoots down a perfect, unbroken line. You look through the hallway, out the back doors, across the gardens, along a 3-kilometer canal of water, all the way to a waterfall cascading down a hill in the distance. It's an optical illusion of infinity. It was designed to make the visitor feel very, very small, and the king feel like he owned the horizon. Part 2. A century of stone building. Something this ambitious isn't a weekend project. It became a generational odyssey. Luigi Vanvitelli died in 1773. He never saw his masterpiece finished. The burden passed to his son Carlo. Imagine the pressure of inheriting a project that was slowly draining the entire kingdom's treasury. But they kept going. Thousands of workers, including slaves and convicts, hauled stone day and night. By the late 1770s, the shell was done. But the inside? That was a theater of power that would take decades more to perfect. Let's talk about the numbers for a second, just to give you a sense of scale. We are talking about 1,742 windows, 34 monumental staircases, and a labyrinth of staterooms that seem to go on forever. The showstopper is the Grand Staircase, the Scalone Reale. If you visit today, pause there. It's carved from a single massive block of marble. The staircase splits into two parallel flights, guarded by marble lions that look like they're ready to roar. Above you, a double vault opens up, painted with the Palace of Apollo. It feels like walking into the clouds. This wasn't just a way to get to the second floor. It was a psychological weapon. It was designed to strip visiting diplomats of their confidence before they even reached the king. Then, there's the throne room. This room wasn't actually finished until 1845, almost a century after the first stone was laid. It is a cavernous hall, over 40 meters long. It's dripping in golden stucco and lit by chandeliers that weigh as much as cars. When you look up, you see a fresco celebrating the glory of the Bourbon Dynasty. It is the ultimate synthesis of architecture and propaganda. Because the construction took so long, walking through the palace is like walking through a timeline of art history. You start in rooms like the Hall of Mars, which are very neoclassical, lots of cool marble, symmetry, and references to Greek mythology. But then, things change. In the early 19th century, history threw a curveball. Napoleon Bonaparte conquered much of Europe, and his family, the Murats, took over Naples for a while. They brought the empire style with them. Suddenly the decor shifts. You see military motifs, Egyptian influences, and a distinct French elegance. It's a fascinating visual scar left by a political takeover. Part 3. Taming Nature. Now, while the walls were going up, Vanvitelli was fighting another battle, a battle against nature itself. A palace this big, with gardens this lush, needs water. An ocean of it, but Caserta didn't have enough local water sources, so Vanvitelli put on his engineer's hat. He designed the Carolina Aqueduct. This wasn't just a pipe, it was a hydraulic masterpiece that rivaled the ancient Romans. He had to source water from the Fizzo Springs and snake it through the mountains for nearly 40 kilometers. Constructed between 1753 and 1770, it was a marvel of the Enlightenment. To cross the Valle di Maddaloni, he built a soaring triple-tiered bridge. It's still there today, a beautiful skeleton of stone against the sky. And here is the brilliant part. This infrastructure didn't just feed the king's fountains, it provided water to the royal silk factories nearby and drinking water to the growing town. It was vanity, yes, but it was vanity that actually helped the people. Part 4. The Long Sleep. But, as we know, empires don't last forever. The year 1861 marked the birth of the modern Italian state, the Risorgimento. Italy was unified. But for Caserta, this was the death knell. The new rulers, the House of Savoy, cared about Turin and Rome. To them, Caserta was a relic of the old regime. It was a symbol of the Bourbons they had just kicked out. The palace was stripped of its status. The furniture was covered in dust sheets. The doors were locked. The vast complex began a slow, heartbreaking descent into obscurity. It was like a great ocean liner left to rust in the dock. Then came the 20th century, and with it, the violence of World War II. The Versailles of Italy found itself in the crosshairs. Because of its massive size and strategic location, it became a military target. From 1943 to 1945, the palace served as the headquarters for the Allied forces in the Mediterranean. Now, this was historically significant. The unconditional surrender of German forces in Italy was actually signed right here in 1945. But the cost was terrible. Bombs fell on the chapel and several wings. But the occupation did even more damage. Imagine thousands of soldiers quartered in a museum. Delicate interiors suffered. There are stories of precious 18th century furniture being broken up and used for firewood to keep the soldiers warm. Floors were scarred by combat boots. In the chaos, artwork vanished, looted and lost to history. By the time the war ended, Caserta was a sleeping giant in a coma. The aqueduct was breached. The fountains were dry bone. The English garden was a jungle of weeds. Dampness was eating the frescoes alive. Part 5. The Awakening. For decades after the war, Italy was trying to rebuild roads and hospitals. They didn't have the money to fix a massive, non-essential palace. Caserta remained a ghostly shell. The turning point didn't arrive until 1997. That was the year UNESCO stepped in. They designated the palace, the aqueduct, and the San Lucio complex as a World Heritage Site. This wasn't just a fancy plaque on the wall. It was global validation. It unlocked international funding and, more importantly, it changed the way the Italian government looked at the building. It wasn't a burden anymore, it was an asset. In 2001, the Great Restoration began. Calling it a cleanup doesn't do it justice. It was a logistical nightmare. Imagine trying to clean the facade, 74,000 square meters of stone, without damaging the carvings. They had to remove centuries of smog and oxidation with tiny instruments. Inside, art restorers worked with microsurgical precision. They reattached flaking paint in the throne room, flake by flake. Outside, landscape archaeologists used 18th century maps to figure out what plants used to be there. They cleared the overgrowth from the great parterre. They dug up the old pipes. And then, the most symbolic moment happened. The water returned. After years of silence, the roar of the Cascata Grande, the great waterfall, came back. The fountain of Diana and Actaeon, where stone dogs attack a stag, was suddenly bathed in spray again. The pulse of the palace had returned. Part 6. From Kings to Jedi. In the 21st century, Caserta found a new kind of royalty. Hollywood directors started scouting locations and they realized something. You cannot fake this kind of grandeur with a computer. CGI is great. But it doesn't feel like cold marble and gold leaf. If you are a sci-fi fan, you've probably walked through Caserta without knowing it. George Lucas famously used the interiors as the Royal Palace of Naboo in Star Wars, The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. That grand staircase we talked about? That's where Queen Amidala descends in her royal gowns. The hallways where the Jedi walk? That's Caserta. It didn't stop there. In Angels and Demons, the palace doubled for the Vatican interiors, a poetic irony considering Charles III built it to rival the Vatican in the first place. In Mission Impossible 3, Tom Cruise's explosive car chase scene happened on these grounds. This cinematic fame did something important. It introduced the palace to a generation that didn't care about the Bourbons. It transformed a dusty historical footnote into a pop culture pilgrimage site. Today, the palace is alive. It's not just a museum where you whisper and look at old chairs. It's a cultural hub. They host contemporary art exhibitions that place modern sculpture right next to Baroque masters. It creates a conversation between the past and the present. The acoustics of the courtyards are perfect for music, hosting legends like Placido Domingo. And every day it's a classroom for thousands of students learning about architecture and history. Part 7. The Final Reflection. So, what is the Palace of Caserta really? It's more than just a list of dates and dimensions. It's a lesson in resilience. It was designed by a king who wanted to be immortal. It was built by an architect who wanted to tame light and space. And it was saved by a generation that refused to let beauty die. The numbers are impressive, 47,000 square meters, 1,200 rooms, but numbers are cold. The true value of Caserta is its story. It survived the fall of its dynasty. It survived the apathy of a new nation. It survived the bombs of a world war. As you walk up that grand staircase today, tracing the steps of Bourbon monarchs and Jedi knights alike, you are participating in a story that is still being written. The ongoing restoration, the rush of the water in the aqueduct, the bloom of the English garden, it's all proof that the vision of 1751 is still valid. The Palace of Caserta is proof of a universal truth. Empires may fall, and maps may change, but great dreams, solidified in stone and nurtured by care, can endure forever. Before we finish, let's take a quick mental walk through some of the specific treasures you'd see if you were there right now. The royal apartments. The living quarters are split into two eras. You have the old apartment from the late 18th century and the new apartment from the 19th. The bedroom of Francis II is a standout. It feels frozen in time. It has heavy empire furniture and a somber atmosphere. It reflects the final dying days of the monarchy. Then you step into the Joachim Murat room. This is all mahogany and bronze. It's flashy. It showcases that distinct French taste brought by Napoleon's brother-in-law. The park and gardens outside. The park tells a tale of two styles. First, you have the Italian garden. This is the part closest to the palace. It's all about control, strict geometry, manicured hedges, perfect lines. It's nature doing what it's told. But then you find the English garden. This was commissioned by Queen Maria Carolina. She wanted something romantic. It mimics wild nature. There are fake ruins, winding paths, and exotic plants imported from Japan and China. There's a spot called the Bath of Venus, a secluded pond that feels like you've stumbled into a lost forest, even though every rock was placed there by hand. The fountains. And finally, the fountains. As you walk the long road to the waterfall, the statues tell a story. You pass the Fountain of Aeolus, the god of winds, surrounded by 28 statues. You see the Fountain of Ceres, holding up the wheat of Sicily, symbolizing the fertility of the land. And the dramatic climax is the Fountain of Diana and Actaeon. It depicts the moment the hunter Actaeon sees the goddess bathing. As punishment, she turns him into a stag, and his own dogs tear him apart. It's a gruesome, beautiful warning carved in stone. Do not offend the gods. Or perhaps, do not offend the king. That is the Palace of Caserta, a place of warnings, of beauty, and of eternal grandeur.